off, don't touch the share screen button. And if you have any questions throughout, just pop them in the chat and I'll be collecting them as we go.
Yeah, okay, we might get cracking. Welcome everybody, and in particular, welcome Sarah Jedrusiak. Dzień dobry. It's really nice to get to have a conversation with you. Oh, tech team question. Are we recording this one? Oh, we are, aren't we? Magic. So it's a privilege to get to talk tonight with Sarah, who has been involved in Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace in Poland, as well as across Europe, including Germany, as well as here in Australia. She's currently living in Melbourne. And on that note, I'd just like to acknowledge that this digital Zoom conversation is taking place predominantly in Australia, and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where we are. Here in Melbourne, it is the land of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this is the land on which we rebel. And I'd like to add that we must be grounded in why we're here, which should be an informative and enjoyable time. But the real reason is that we're in a climate and ecological emergency. And so we need strong action. We need to rebel for us, for our families, for our communities. Sarah has stories to share with us, which hopefully will inform how we rebel in Australia and about how we're connected in a global movement. So on that note, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about how you got involved in Extinction Rebellion.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. That was a lovely welcome for everyone, I think. I got involved so I am living in Victoria and Melbourne now, and I got involved in Extinction Rebellion in December in 2018. So I spent the last 3 years living overseas, mainly in Poland, but generally traveling around Europe a lot. And I was working on the climate summit, so COP24, which was held in Katowice, which was an interesting choice. It's the third time that the climate summit's been held in Poland. And our Prime Minister or Premier opened up the whole proceedings by saying we have 200 years worth of coal to burn and we intend to burn it. That was how he started the climate summit. So we didn't start in a good place at all. But my work was involved around getting everyone into one really happy, healthy place called the Climate Hub. So we were opening up a space for people to come and share what they're working on, share their programs and projects, give workshops, talks, share strategies. We had a lot of regenerative culture sort of talks where people were meditating and just trying to ground themselves in the stress that was the climate summit. It's basically 2 weeks of 19-hour days, and it's very tiring. But yeah, we were lucky enough that Extinction Rebellion came to do their Heading for Extinction talk. And that way I met one of the founders or co-founders of Extinction Rebellion. So Liam was heavily involved in the first things that were happening with Extinction Rebellion, the big first bridge blockade and other activities, and he's still involved now. And I was super inspired by them. I just thought what they were doing was amazing. I didn't have time to get involved in what was happening in London because I was preparing for the climate summit. And I think I was in London just before they actually blocked all the bridges. but like the energy and the momentum that started was amazing. Everyone was suddenly talking about it. It was something that was relevant. And even in a country like Poland, where, I mean, I am Polish, I was born and raised Polish, but living there reminded me that things are very different. In Australia, I guess, we're very open, we're kind of more relaxed. Things in Poland are a lot more traditional. It is a different culture, there's a different way of talking and behaving. And so something like civil disobedience wasn't really a big thing there. There's lots of activism, but there's lots of sort of marches, there's lots of environmental groups, lots of petitioning, but not so much just grassroots civil disobedience where people get out on the street and do something. And after meeting the XR folks and spending some time with them and doing a few actions inside the climate summit, I thought it would be awesome to start XR in Poland. And it was basically as easy as that.
As easy as 1, 2, 3, rebel. Just a reminder for everybody that if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments of the Zoom chat or on Facebook if you're watching there, or the one viewer on YouTube, and we'll keep track of those and we'll ask them of Sarah later on. Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. So you're connected to a bit of the whirlwind that was coming out of the UK. I think it's an interesting point that you've mentioned that the Premier of Poland, said we've got 200 years worth of coal, we've got to burn that. Because I think the perception often is that, well, Australia is a gargantuan coal mine, gas resource, etc. But so are other parts of the world. So we're sort of battling this entrenched fossil fuel perception and tied in with politics, obviously. And so what's your feeling? What progress was made in building the movement in Poland, considering the social conservatism you alluded to?
We had a lot of barriers at the start, but I mean, to give some context, Poland is, in terms of its relationship with coal and politics, they're exactly the same. People would always laugh that I've left Australia just to come to another country that has an equally bad coal problem. Poland's known for importing coal as well, that it burns, and then it exports lots of coal to burn, and there's just this big mess of coal everywhere. But there's also a lot of parts of Poland that are heavily dependent on coal mining. That's just been their history and their tradition for hundreds of years. Without that, they don't have an industry, they don't have a job, and those parts of Poland just basically crumble. So there's a lot of talk about just transition, obviously, and about finding ways to move workers into better jobs or greener jobs, because it is also bad for health. Obviously, the air quality is shocking, and it's not as easy as saying we've just got to move to renewables, stop doing it. The political context, Poland's political scene, I guess, is very divided, where there's a very right-wing side, and they've been in power for quite a long time, and half the country basically supports that. And on the other side, there's the less right-wing side, and the other half of the country supports that. But voting isn't compulsory there, so that can also be difficult, because not necessarily everyone goes that wants to have an opinion. And yeah, it's a very, I got the impression there that everyone's talking about politics all the time. Like, here people say it's rude to talk about it at dinner if you've first met someone. I remember being told that you can't ask people who they're voting for because that would be rude. Over there, it's like the first thing, tell you what party they go for, that you should go for them, why they're the best party in the world, and a whole bunch of very, what I would call draconian sort of laws that they're trying to get across the line, which, I mean, each to their own, but the latest was that abortions would be illegal in Poland under any circumstances. So if the woman's life is in danger, if the child's life's in danger, if there's been a case of rape, then abortions are not allowed. So that's the kind of government we're talking about, that really are operating in a sort of Dark Ages bubble, as far as I'm concerned. And they have a lot of support at the same time. So people are raised to be very proper, to behave a certain way, to speak a certain way, to appear a certain way. And so getting people out of that mind frame and saying to them, hey, why don't we go just lie down on the road? Like, that's quite scary. It's completely outrageous. And when we started with XR, we definitely, the first thing we did was have a giant meeting, and everyone wanted to get involved and everyone just wanted to block a bridge. I'm assuming that happened everywhere in the world, because it was just, let's go block a bridge. And I was like, great, why are we blocking it? Like, what's the purpose? We need to have like a message behind that. Because in the UK, they did block all their bridges, but the point was to block access to the central business district, saying that this is what's destroying our environment, and this is where the problems are beginning and ending, sort of thing. And everyone in Poland kept saying, let's just go and block that bridge over there, it'd be great. And we had to keep saying, why? Wait, let's think about it. But yeah, saying something like, the first thing we did was, we realized everyone wanted an action. And so we thought we would do paint the streets. That was the first time that was happening in England at the time. And we thought, let's just get all the materials ready, all the posters, teach people how to make glue, just send it out to the whole country. We just had a really open Facebook page and really open document system, because it wasn't that bad, sort of thing. And we told everyone, just go out and do this if you feel like it. And everyone got such a buzz and so much excitement that they were putting up these really cool pictures, and time's running out, and well, we're fucked, and you know, all those, like the first sort of pictures that we had for XR, the skull and crossbones and the bees. That once everyone started doing that, it just sort of made everyone feel really energized and empowered that they can do something that's a little bit naughty and is sending a message and getting more and more following, because we were getting lots of people really quickly all around the country. So we felt like we had to keep like expanding things and opening up the options. And so the next thing we had was, before die-ins were a thing that everyone was doing everywhere, when they were still brand new, everyone was really excited about them. We thought we'd do die-ins and open it up again to say, hey, let's do a national die-in day, who wants to do it? And the response was phenomenal. We just had hundreds of people messaging saying, how do we do a die-in? What's a banner? Like, how do we get out there? Should we tell the police? What's the first step? So we kept updating all these documents and just having a really open space to send everything out. People were doing it at different times, what suited them. Some experiences were amazing, and some, there was like 4 people lying on the ground. Still looked really nice because people were doing something. They felt connected to the wider movement, because even if they were in a teeny tiny town, they could still get involved. So that was when everything, basically in 3 months, we went to like 10,000 people within Extinction. And yeah, everyone was doing actions and planning things. And I guess that's where, at that moment, everyone internationally was, all the groups had suddenly exploded everywhere. And it started to get a little bit messy at that moment. Nobody had talked about how to get organised or what to do once you find some people. So that was when we had the first European XR gathering. People all got to Brussels somehow. And we had a weekend together to talk about how things were going, how regen was looking, because regen was something nobody had really thought about. We just all wanted to get out there and do actions. There was lots of tears, there's lots of hugging, there was lots of stress, and everyone just unloading what wasn't working. But we found out that we were all having the exact same problems. We were all feeling like everything was a bit disconnected, and we weren't sure what was happening when and where, that we were all not sleeping. We were just always doing XR and activism stuff. And we found that everyone was trying to like rewrite the demands and rewrite the Declaration of Rebellion. And I mean, one step was to change it into your language and make sure that the context was right and the message was right and that it made sense to people locally. But there was also everyone trying to add 4th, 5th, 6th demands, everyone trying to rewrite the declaration and change all the parameters and rules and wording. And we all realized that that wasn't going to work. We all realized that we're all doing it, and it just wasn't. We kind of all came to the conclusion that we're in Extinction Rebellion because that's what inspired us. That's what we want to be doing, and that we can fit all the things that we want to in there. Like if we want to take more time to change our government, we can. If we want to take less time, we can. But let's just all have the same set of demands, push for the one thing. and then we'll adapt it in our context if we need to, but let's just keep it as the one movement and not try to reinvent things, I guess. So that was a moment, I think, where most countries in Europe found like a calm and realized that we're all at the same stage, we've all gone through the same madness of like building it all too quickly and then not really knowing what to do with ourselves next. And that was just before the April Rebellion, because that was in March. So yeah, it was a very intense few months.
Sounds like it. So that period of rapid growth was sort of triggered by the 5 bridges in the UK, then the start of 2018. No, 2019, last year.
2018.
End of 2018, October.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's a big interconnected story there. I think it's good to note that what you're saying about the actions, you know, giving people something to do, an easy option or an easy way to get involved straight away is really empowering. I think that's something we're learning across the board, really. So there is a paint the streets going on locally. For those who are unaware, check out Facebooks and other communication channels. Just a reminder, we're talking here with Sarah, who's sharing her stories from Europe, from Poland. We're going to hear a bit more about other places. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat or on the live stream place. So I just want to wind it back a bit, because I know you've yourself participated in direct action. I think was the largest NVDA nonviolent direct action came out of the climate camp that you organized in Poland?
Yeah, the one in Poland. That was the first time we've had that big an environmental mess in VDA.
What happened there? What did you guys do?
So that was, in Europe, there are regular climate camps, which is basically a collection of groups and people who meet, usually spend a week doing workshops, training, having lots of conversations and just getting to know each other and getting to know different parts of the movement. And I guess getting to know each other's sort of agendas, but in a nice way, like understanding what everyone's working towards and what their goals and objectives are. And then you do lots of NVDA training. And at the end of the week, everyone's prepared to do a mass NVDA, which generally involves running to a coal mine or a coal pit or something like that. So in Poland, we thought it was the right moment to put as many groups together as we could in July last year, because we had so much momentum. People were really excited to do something big. XR had just exploded. We just had open resources everywhere and everyone was starting groups everywhere. And we thought it would be a good time to come together. So it was the first time that nationally we come together as XR. And we also had Stu there. So he's one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion together with Roger and Gail. Stu came to introduce us to SOS, this brand new concept that they thought of because they thought things are a mess and we need to work out how everyone can work together in a really nice, smooth sort of way. So we started SOS workshops and training there as well. And it was the first time, we'd ever heard of that or seen that. And we had basically a lot of really, really different groups. So we had the XR crowd, we had lots of people from Greenpeace. Greenpeace is quite involved in everything, like in all the environmental movements overseas. They do a lot of activism and they support a lot of the grassroots groups. We had a whole range of anarchists who are a really critical, huge part of the environmental movement over there and the social movement, really. And so everyone basically looked after their part. We'd have daily, like giant sort of plenary check-ins. And we had 6 weeks, I think, to organize everything in the end, to get all our media and messaging ready, make sure that we had a spot that we could be in. All the police knew about it. We were aware that was going to happen. So we had to find other ways to organize things so that the police wouldn't be there before we got there, like in the coal mine, basically. And we had XR looking after, basically there was like 3 fingers that go into the coal mine or the coal pit, and 2 of them were XR. So we did our NVDA training and one of them was a bit more anarchist. So they're happy to run, scream, brawl, do whatever they have to do to get past the police, basically. And everyone else just calmly ran in. So one of the groups got in really easily, got into the coal pit, sat there for a few hours, took a photo, and then came back out. Everyone else just got some fines, and then we all celebrated afterwards. But it was just a really big week of collaboration, getting to know each other, knowing what everyone's working on. And yeah, it was the first time, I think we had 2,000 people there who actually took part in the action. And yeah, it was phenomenal. Everyone had this amazing energy.
2,000 people, that sounds pretty good. Get 2,000 people in the downtown Melbourne.
Awesome.
I reckon the Premier would come to the table.
Hopefully.
But did you get arrested then as well? Was that when that happened, or was that when some other actions?
That was a bit earlier. So I'm an activist with Greenpeace as well, and we did 2 actions in really close succession. So there was one that was an Nestle action. Lots of officers around Europe did that, which everyone just walked off after the action. Basically, we left like 350 kilograms of Nestle rubbish in front of the Nestle building, and also got a scissor lift up to the building to put a sticker on there saying, "We think this is yours." It was really friendly. The police were there, fire brigade was there. We all hung out. And I guess through those things, we sort of learned a bit of relationship building, I guess. So like when the fire brigade turned up, we have a group of people who are protecting the scissor lift, and the fireman said, "How long are you going to be here? Like, are you serious? Do you use a mobile phone? Like, does it really matter if we're using plastic?" And I was like, "But do you have kids or a family? Like, you know, there's just a pocket of ocean that's just plastic swirling around." And he was like, "Yeah, I know, it's a mess, it's fucked." I was like, "Well, that's why we're here." And I mean, "Do you love Nestle?" And he was like, "No, I don't really care." I was like, "Okay." So we're here for 2-3 hours, and if you're okay with it, we'll just leave after that. We'll probably leave the plastic as well. And he was like, "All right, I'll go get a coffee." And so they just didn't care. And they knew that we were true to our word as well. If we said that's what we were going to do, that's what we're going to do. So then the next action was a much bigger action. It was a bit of a political action where there was 50 people. We dropped giant banners on the sides of 2 buildings. So one's the leading political party and one's the opposition. And we covered them in these black sort of banners that said "Poland without coal 2030. And that resulted in 3 days in arrest and a big court case at the end. And at the end of the court, at the court case, we didn't think it would necessarily get this far, but it did with my group, because of the 50 people that were arrested, 25 were released that day, but the rest of us had to stay for 3 days. And so in court, though, we had an amazing opportunity where we have some really great lawyers, and we basically said that we will continue to do what we're doing. We do this because we believe in our future. We believe in saving the future. We don't want to be breathing in toxic air, and we don't want waste everywhere. And we need to be thinking about how to move away from fossil fuels. And so it needs to be something that's at the top of everyone's minds. If our politicians aren't thinking about it, then who is? And that's why we stand by what we did. And literally we will be there until the day the government swears to get away from coal. And we were all released, and all charges were cleared a few months ago, which was nice. Yay. So it was a little bit hairy. The police can be quite repressive and brutal there sometimes. It does depend on the relationship you have. Some people had it a lot worse than others. They do a strip search when you're there. But with a lot of us, the strip search was basically just squat 3 times and I won't look, but hopefully you're okay. Some people definitely had a bit more intensive sort of situations, and Greenpeace pulled them up on it instantly, saying that there was no consistency, it was inappropriate. And we're obviously, we're pacifists, where you can see that we're not violent, we're not aggressive. We're just regular people protesting for our rights to live, basically. So the police ended up having to apologise and put out some official statements about that. But it was pretty intense. I mean, you get into a place where your hands are cuffed, you have no access to food or water, they won't let you go to the toilet half the time. They take away your shoelaces, half your clothing, your underwear, and they're like, you have no idea what's happening next, basically. They put you in a little box. It's just got like, well, the cell is just a box with a plastic box inside it. There's no better way to describe this. And an open window, so it's like 5 degrees at night. And they just don't care if you're cold or if you're hungry. Again, we happen to have some police officers that we chatted to lots. We kept saying to them, we understand why we're doing this. This is like the problems that we see. This is why I think it's important for everyone. We're not just doing it for us. And because of that, we even ended up getting vegan meals delivered to our doors and stuff like that. They were okay with that, which isn't always the case in Poland. But yeah, you definitely feel really helpless and you feel emotionally quite exhausted because it's always unnerving. And I think through experiences like that, I learned a lot of respect for making sure that regen is in place and that people are looked after. Like I think legal support is a huge one. Technically, we were in arrest for so long because we didn't have enough lawyers. And I mean, Greenpeace has some awesome lawyers, they can afford to have them, and there wasn't enough of them. So I always think that priority on any action is making sure we're looking after people, making sure that people feel safe and cared for, because kind of once you're in court, things can go any direction sometimes. And yeah, you just want to make sure that everyone's looked after. So I think that's a really big learning experience. And coming out of there, just feeling exhausted from like the ordeal of the 3 days before that. Although going straight into an XR action the next day, which was awesome. Except the second I got to the XR action, we were doing the blood of our children. We were going to just spill blood everywhere. And one of the police officers that had arrested me 3 days earlier saw me and he ran towards me and was just like, why are you here? I just let you out. Can you seriously not be here right now? And I was like, this is fine. We're just going to spill some paint. Is that okay? He's like, no, you can stand over there with the banner, but don't spill anything. I was like, okay, we won't spill anything, but we're going to stand over there and chant. He was like, fine, thank you. And after that, every action we saw him at, he was totally happy and relaxed. So yeah, I think it was just, there was lots of experiences around just building relationships, but also making sure we look after each other, I guess.
Did the blood end up getting spilt by other people, or like it didn't happen at all?
It's still sitting in boxes, I assume, in the office. We didn't know what to do with it. It just stayed there.
Fair enough. That's pretty intense story. I know XR members up in Brisbane have also been locked up for quite a long time without access to normal avenues of getting out. And people here as well spent quite a while in Melbourne in the cell before going to see the magistrate. But that seems like you set a big precedent in Poland there with that case. You're basically let off because of was it the judge or was it a jury? I guess
we had a judge. The jury was like the people, like a civilian jury sort of thing, where the people that arrested us basically were vouching for whether we were okay or not. But it was a big precedent. But unfortunately, we also taught the police with that activity that they can't be bothered arresting that many people at a time ever again. So the next big XR action we did, they were sort of more prepared to not arrest 50 people because it clogged up their entire system in Warsaw for like 3 days. And they said they weren't going to put themselves through that. Like they had no transport, they didn't have lawyers, they didn't have judges, they didn't have anything. They were really stressed out about how little, they had no space for us. At one point, they were panicking about where we were going to sleep. They were going to put us just in an open sort of hall and let us all sleep together. We were like, great, let's do that. Didn't happen, but yeah. And I mean, yeah, they were also saying some pretty scary things because they'd forget that I could speak Polish half the time. They just assumed we were a bunch of immigrants. And then they'd say really inappropriate things. And I would be a bit mortified and unsure. I mean, when you're in handcuffs, you're not as smart as you are when you're not, I guess. So yeah, it was a little bit interesting.
And when did you leave Poland?
I left in November last year. So I was involved in XR the whole time. I came back to Vic. I happened to be in Victoria when the October bridge blockade happened and got to see that happen. And then I headed back to Europe to finish some stuff. And I happened to be in Berlin when they were doing their October Rebellion.
Ah, interesting. I think it's pretty hard to tell what's happened overseas. Like in April, there was only really London to follow, so it was kind of okay, we can maybe tell what's going on. But then in October, I think we were busy locally. There was stuff all over the world. I don't really have a clue what happened in Germany, in Berlin. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, Berlin was huge. From memory, the decision in the end was that there'd be 4 major cities blocked. One being Berlin, one being New York, one London. I can't remember what the 4th one was for some reason. Maybe I think it was going to be Paris. I can't remember if Paris happened or not because I was distracted with Berlin as well. But there was basically a giant open camp set up in front of the Bundestag. So it's kind of central to everything. It's a giant park and everyone was just invited to come there. There was a bunch of open channels and ways to get involved online. So they had a website where you could join WhatsApp groups, you could join activity or working groups, or support groups of some sort. And then the main roundabout, the biggest roundabout in Berlin, were the Berlin Victory Column stands. That was taken at the start of the week. Everyone set up camp all around the sides. And for the rest of the week, the plan was rolling actions. So if you were in these WhatsApp groups, you'd find out where the next location is a couple of hours beforehand, and everyone would just go to that location if they could. People would stay there as long as they could. If they were there for a few hours and then they needed to swap, then people would be swapping out with them and taking turns sort of thing. The bridges weren't cleared very quickly. Like the roundabout was held for the whole week, but the bridges sometimes were cleared a little bit faster. But then XR also got a little bit smarter every time. So they'd get more and more people in one spot, or we'd I think there was some locking on involved, like basically to each other, but not to anything else. And there was also, it was freezing. That's the other key thing to know. It was autumn. So during the day, maybe a max of 9. At night, I think it started to sort of lightly snow on one of the nights, but it was freezing cold. But so everyone just had all the right gear and equipment. We had hypothermia blankets. There's lots of cups of tea and thermoses of tea rolling around. Everyone had sleeping mats and sleeping bags, even just for the day to keep warm. And yeah, everything just kept moving along in different parts of Berlin. And if the police thought that outsmarted everyone, they just blocked off a bridge before XR got there. We just block like Alexanderplatz or somewhere else so that they wouldn't know where we're going and what we're doing. And the vibe and the energy was amazing. Everyone was quite tired as well, but because people kept rotating roles, like nobody had to stay in one spot permanently. So people that were blocking the Victory Column, they would go back to camp regularly and swap with people that were at camp. So you go to camp to get a warm like meal, get a warm sleep, and then you'd come back when you're re-energized and refueled and swap back out. And I think it was just the numbers of people as well that kept your energy really high because everyone was really excited to be there all the time. So you just wanted to be doing stuff the whole time. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. Lots of organizing.
And so were there people coming from like neighboring countries? Like, did people come from Poland and Austria, Netherlands and stuff, or concentrate on Berlin?
Yeah, you know? Heaps of people came from other countries because Berlin is a kind of big cross spot where lots of people stop in anyway. But yeah, there was a huge mix of different countries. Everyone came on board and either brought their own actions or their own banners or their own, I don't know, songs and activities. So it was really nice. It was a really big mixing pot of everyone.
And what I'm curious about is what result that maybe had in Germany. Did you gain any political traction? Did they respond?
Definitely something that was talked about a lot, and there was a lot of positive messaging that came out of it where the government was saying, we know we need to do better. We're trying to do things, maybe we're not moving fast enough. Maybe we need a tighter timeline. And there was lots of support. Another reason the actions kept going for so long was because new people just kept coming. People would just kind of, I guess what was happening in London, people would just join the blockades because they wanted to be there. They heard about what was happening and they wanted to see it. Roads were blocked everywhere, but people didn't seem that angry. they just would go around, sort of thing. So yeah, I think it made a difference in terms of getting even more people to know about the topic and to know why XR does what they do. And the government was definitely talking about it, but in a positive way, because I guess that's where Germany's already focusing on lots of renewable energy and stuff like that as well, but far from perfect. Like, I don't know if any government's good, but it definitely made them think a little bit more about it and talk more about it.
Yeah, it sounds like they're sort of perceived as being kind of leading in some ways compared to the rest of us.
I don't know if the Germans feel that way. But
yeah, probably not. What about didn't you say you were here during the Spring Rebellion as well, or was it just the bridge blockade in Melbourne that you were here for? So what could you share? You know, what's the vibe having experienced Extinction Rebellion in Germany, in Poland, in Australia? Would you say it's very similar, or tell us about the differences or similarities?
I think it's a bit different here. I think we're so used to talking about how far apart we are and how distance is such an issue that comes up regularly, but we could never do that because we're all so far apart. Whereas that doesn't stop anyone overseas. People have driven for days, weeks. You catch trains for days if you have to get to a certain spot. So I guess distance doesn't stop anyone. And when I came here, I was surprised when I'd said something about doing a mass NVDA and everyone said, oh, but we're too far apart. We can't do that. And I was like, well, I think we can if we plan it, if we think about it. And I mean, we have done mass NVDAs. It's happened in Australia before. So I think it's something that can be done. I think I was surprised coming back that lots of people will say no to something and have reasons for why we can't do it, rather than saying, it could be tricky, let's find a way to do it. Because I think that was one of the main differences I found over there, that if someone said, let's do this, it sounds impossible and ridiculous. Everyone would go, great, it's impossible and ridiculous, how do we get it done? I don't know why the approach is different, but it's definitely something that I noticed coming back because I was really surprised. I definitely spent all my time over there going, Australia is so much better than this, they're just easier to work with, they're more open-minded, this is ridiculous. And then I came back and I was like, oh, there's like no's for everything. I'll try. So yeah, I think that's been a bit of a difference. But otherwise, I mean, it feels like the same sort of family vibe. Everyone's trying to get things done together and everyone wants to work towards the same goal. So yeah, I think the XR sort of, the values and the principles and the general messaging gets through to everyone in the same way, which is really nice to see.
And so what would you say, just if you were to say things that have really worked in your experience of XR, like what's worked?
I think being really open and making things really accessible. I think that's another thing that I found different here, that it seems really difficult sometimes to know where to go, how to get involved. When I came back, I spent ages trying to work out how to find a meeting or who to talk to about finding a meeting. And it was really hard. And I say really hard compared to my experience of, I turn up in Berlin, I message someone, say, who's in XR? And then I message that person and then we're planning an action the next day. Like it was just, and they all, they had all their sort of roles and mandates in place. And even if I went to Spain, it was the same thing. It's just, is there an XR group around? Yeah, over there. Okay, great. Do you want to come paint the streets with us? Sure. Like it was just, it felt really accessible, but here it just feels hard sometimes to, well, now it doesn't, but I happen to know where things are now. But I just know with someone coming in, it seemed hard to find all that stuff. So I think the things that worked the best were being really open, really transparent, and having ways for everyone to communicate. Like we started XR in Poland in Warsaw, which is, I don't know, it's considered either the Victoria or the Sydney, depending on where you're from. It's either the Melbourne or the Sydney, where it's like, oh, those big guys up in Warsaw, they think they own everything. But we didn't start it as Warsaw, we just started it as XR Poland, and we were like, everyone's welcome. You can all do your thing. There was lots of moments where people were like, oh, those guys shouldn't be going to that much. And these guys shouldn't be writing these letters, and those people shouldn't be doing those things. But after a little bit of talking together, it was like, if it fits within the values and principles, they can do that. They can do whatever still represents XR, still stands for it, and is still part of that messaging. So I think just making sure that things were communicated really clearly and collectively, and just having access to everything. I think that made it really easy. And that was like that were the biggest things to making it really, easy to join XR and easy to start doing things in XR. That was quite nice.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I think that's something we're always learning, or have been told many times, is make it transparent, make it easy, reduce the barriers for people to get involved. From the audience, because there seems to be a lot of questions coming through.
There are. So I'll just start from the top and ask a couple, and feel free to go in as much depth or as little as you want or feel is relevant. So the first question we had is there a rural city divide as much as there is here between Poland and Australia? Do lots of jobs are lots of jobs dependent on the coal mining industry? And it goes on, it's all kind of one. Is the urban population more in favor of renewables than country people who might depend on coal jobs? So I think you sort of covered around that a little bit earlier on, and you want to expand on that a little about the kind of similarities between our country and Poland.
Yeah. Well, with the kind of political divide, whether it's urban and rural and stuff like that, funnily, the political divide in Poland is literally down the middle. So half, some people say to me that it's the possibly side that had it harder, maybe the slightly poorer side, are more in favor of the right, whereas on the left, where they've had it a bit easier and, I don't know, more access just to opportunity, I guess, and chances, because Poland was a communist country until 91. So it has hugely come out of that, but you can still feel a lot of that history sort of in Poland. So I guess the political context and the history there make things a little bit different. But so, one side is very right and conservative, and the other side is much more open and kind of now, I guess, like living in the now. There's a very big divide between cities and the rural sort of areas. There's heaps of rural country towns, tiny little one-street villages. There's lots of that, and only a few kind of major cities. And
has there been much mobilization of those rural towns?
Yeah, heaps. Again, because people have access to everything, they'd usually just reach out. They'd usually email me and say, hey, we really want to do like a die-in. Our town's got like no people in it. And like, just find a spot, lie down, you'll be fine. So there's definitely those people still get involved and they want to do stuff, and they found like little clumps of regions that would work together anyway. And then if we did do something together nationally, then all those people would help each other come to the one spot.
Great, awesome. And
jobs, actually, because you asked about that as well. I did talk about it. There are lots of jobs that are dependent on coal and mining, but even the like the coal miners, there's a special name for them, but even they very often said that they're sick of this industry because it's destroying their air. The levels of asthma and sickness over there are horrendous. Kids in like preschool are having massive developmental problems with their breathing, and all of that's not going to be fixed if we keep mining coal and burning it. So like those parts of Poland know that they need a change, but they need support for that. They need the government to help them. They need subsidies to stop being put into fossil fuels. They can't just change and reinvent like 300 years worth of history. And that's a thing, they've been doing that stuff for hundreds of years. So it's not that easy a switch over. But there's so many people in those areas that are like, I want something else, but if I don't go into the coal mine today, I can't feed my family. And you don't get government support there. Like, it's really, yeah, they won't help you if you're struggling.
Yeah, and I noticed when you first mentioned about it, you also used the word climate justice, and just transition. So yeah, totally. So do you, when you were working with Greenpeace and all of that, and XR and Connected, were you using the Movement of Movements agreement or the Rebel agreement to collaborate, or did you just find there was organic harmony?
There was organic harmony. Not every country was the same. So in Greenpeace, we would have meetings talking about XR in our countries. And some countries, like the Italians, were like, we can't deal with those people. They're ridiculous and we won't work with them. In London, there was obviously a fragile relationship, but they were like, they invaded our office. Let's be friends.
How do you like it?
They were like, let's see how that goes. In Poland, big support for anything that's mobilizing, for anything that's encouraging people to get out on the streets. I worked in the Polish office as well, and all my bosses and co-workers were, half of them were in XR as well. Like I know in the Nordic countries, in XR, half the group is usually Greenpeace. So then they end up sharing resources like warehouses, NVDA training, NVC training, and just giving everything they can to strengthen the movement, because we need as many people doing this as possible. So we didn't have rebel agreements back then either. We didn't have anything in writing or movement of movement sort of talks. We all knew we're fighting for the same thing. So we all worked together. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And do you think that there's a reason why XR and Greenpeace in Australia are not as close as they are in Europe?
No, I'm not really sure what that's about. I still work for Greenpeace in Europe, so I see lots of cool things still happening there. They give heaps of funding and do lots of supporting. I haven't talked to anyone here about it because I'm an activist with Australia now, and I'm not sure why there's no relationship. I mean, in most of the other countries in Europe, basically the people who were, lots of the people that were involved were from XR or had started XR, the people that were in Greenpeace. So I guess that didn't happen here, and that's why there's not that connection.
Yeah, well, if there's anybody watching who is in both Greenpeace and XR Oz, get us connected. We've got some company or collaborator.
Yeah, we need your resources.
Yeah. All right, there's another question here. Something that interests me about Poland is the fascist resurgence and how we might need to be prepared for that in the coming years in the work that we're doing. The concern that in moments of crisis, societies can become hyper-defensive, and whether we in Australia should be thinking ahead for combating that. It's a little off topic, but if you please.
I think it's still relevant. I mean, nationalism there is, it's unwell, I would call it. It's a huge problem in terms of how people behave. You know, there's regular nationalist marches. The skinheads, like the fascist scene there is huge. They'll just beat people up on the street for being a hipster or whatever. So it can be quite scary, and that's where you have the anarchist squads walking around protecting people, basically making sure everything's okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's I mean, it's very difficult to compare because that's, again, it's hundreds of years of history. The, you know, the fascist and the nationalism stuff over there really comes from the war, from the history. Poland disappeared off the map for 250 years, so they hold on to that heritage and that sort of patriotism. Whereas here, I guess I think we have a very different situation where, I mean, a lot of us, I know I always had a problem because I didn't feel quite at home here because I was aware that my roots are European, and I felt like something over there was always pulling me. So that's why I did move to Europe for a few years. Being over there, I was like, oh, I wasn't raised here. I don't understand the place. So I guess I'm still lost, and it made me reflect on the fact that there's lots of people who are sort of first generation in another country, because my parents are both from Poland. They came here as refugees as well. They escaped their country. So that was also an interesting link when I realized that they spent 9 months as refugees in Rome, and then they came here running away from a horrible situation when Poland was still communist. And I guess, yeah, I don't know if the situation will ever be the same here, but definitely in terms of remembering that this country, I mean, sovereignty wasn't ceded. It belonged to another people that horrible things happened to, and that we don't understand half the time, whether we choose not to learn about it or whether we're just not taught about it. I'll go off rail a tiny bit right now, because I do once a week, once a fortnight, have a 6-year-old who lives with me, my partner's daughter. And I asked her yesterday about, I think we were talking about welcoming ceremonies, welcome to country, and a smoking ceremony. And she was like, what's that? And I was like, Indigenous people welcome you to their country because this is their land. Like, this is where their heritage and their history is. They understand this place better than anyone else does, because we don't understand it. You know, white people came, gave it 4 seasons. I worked at the Royal Botanic Gardens for 3 years as well, and the seasons make no sense. Our director got attacked on the project once for suggesting that we might have 12 seasons in Melbourne, as the Indigenous cultures have identified. The project was very upset with him. But yeah, when I was talking to Cleo, the 6-year-old, I was like, do you know anything about our history at all? And she was like, no, not really. I was like, where do you think like all these white people came from? She's like, weren't they always here? I was like, no. She's like, wasn't there this like captain that came? And I was like, yeah, but there was already other people here. And people just aren't taught about it, sort of thing. So I know I've completely derailed of that, but I just think here it's so much more complicated and so much more fragile, the situation, and how to even approach it. Because over there, it's people fighting for what is their country, and people who have gone way too far for fighting what they believe is their country, where, I don't know, they start attacking each other even though they're all from the same country. And here's just a very, very complicated situation that is truly as important. But yeah, I think we still probably have a lot of work to do on social justice here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just want to give a shout out at this point to Seed Mob, who are the youth Indigenous that do a lot of activism, anti-fracking with Origin. And yeah, anybody watching, please check out and like and share their pages. And also check out the Mantra refugee situation that's happening at the moment. I'll just Google Mantra refugee if you're not aware. But just good to flag those issues at this point. All right. We are rolling in for our next mass mobilization at the moment, like sort of building up to that. If you could dream any action in Melbourne here, what would it be?
In Melbourne, I think it would be amazing if we could block that whole city like square, that whole rectangle where we have our city. And then we could also encourage removing cars from that region, because I think it's just not that hard. We could do it so that no cars drive through there ever. That's just like a whole nother campaign about removing cars. But if we block all of that, and I think we could do it. I think it would just be about getting out to the right people and telling them why we need to do it. We have such a big city. We have so many people. In Warsaw, people would always be like, oh, our city's overwhelming. And I'd be like, you have like 1.5 million people. Like, it looks empty on the streets for me, because I'm from Melbourne, where we have, I think we're close to 7 million people now in our population. And I was like, that's a city. We've got so many people. If we had the right way of approaching them and the messaging, because you do need to speak differently to different audiences, and you need to get, people have their own emotional reasons for why they engage in climate activism, and they have their own ways of getting engaged in like fighting for something, because people have different ways of getting involved in a fight. So I think that it's really about making sure that we speak to all of them and don't alienate them. I guess that's also where that easy accessibility barrier thing has to be easy, because I know in Poland, people have never done this sort of meeting thing and coming into a group of people you've never met. So turning up to your first XR meeting could be a really scary kind of something that you're really nervous about and you don't feel all that comfortable about, but you'll do it because you know you need to do something. But if that first meeting wasn't welcoming, they'll never come back, and they'll tell all their friends it was rubbish as well. So I think we can definitely block the entire city square.
I like that. Let's do that. I've got 2 more questions. Do I have time for 2 more questions, Andy? Yeah, great. So I don't even know what this is, but hopefully you do. Is XR part of Progressive International? And if not, is that going to happen?
I don't know what Progressive International is, so I'd say not. I'm Googling it. No, I've never, but I think it's something that I've seen before. I mean, XR isn't really a part of anything, though. XR is just XR in Poland. They do collaborate with groups where they need. There's also groups that they've collaborated with that things have gone a bit pear-shaped. So, like I said, we didn't have member agreements or activist agreements or anything like that. But when the October Rebellion happened in Poland, there was some really extreme people that were sort of attached to something by their necks, next to some really young people who have never done any sort of actions before, and they were really quite scared and uncomfortable about what was happening around them. So we had to have a big session afterwards to sort of communicate that XR does things a certain way, we work a certain way, and if you come and do stuff with us, then we do it this way. Also, if we join your action, we'll do what we're comfortable with. So like I said, at the climate camp, if the anarchists wanted to run and scream and get pepper sprayed, awesome, do it. Someone's got to do it. But XR didn't have to do that. We didn't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There's a, you know, when you want to mass mobilize everyone, you've got to create space for everyone to be comfortable and do what they need to do. And so, yeah, but we have a particular DNA, and by sticking to that, we keep it safe for people who want to be a part of that kind of action. So last question, and this one I might even be able to contribute, but anyway, why doesn't XR hit coal mines in Australia like you did in Poland?
That's a good question. In Poland, I mean, XR specifically didn't hit the coal mine. It was a climate camp. It's just something that you do as part of a camp. It's something you do to build skills, to cross-train, to meet other people in other groups. But XR as a movement doesn't attack coal mines, doesn't attack necessarily specific organizations. The idea is to build masses of people as quickly as possible and pressure our government, because the government's not listening to anyone. Businesses are certainly not going to listen to anyone. We've tried that for years. It's clearly not working. And we do have other groups like Greenpeace who can do the lobbying and who can push people and say, you know, we want that company to stop doing this or that company do that. But XR specific, like Mojo and Direction, is to get mass disruption in like really open public spaces and to pressure the government by them feeling that people power and feeling that these are my citizens and they're really unhappy with me right now, which is why we need heaps of people to do it and just to disrupt. If we keep blocking coal mines, like we're upsetting, and don't get me wrong, the people that are blocking coal mines, it's amazing stuff. I know heaps of people that do it, and we need to be doing that as well. But XR specifically is just trying to get more people involved. We're not trying to stop one specific target. It's just about climate change and halting what we're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a shout out, the Stop Adani camp is re-recruiting for people to start mobilizing up there. So if you are interested in blocking a coal mine, it's a great way to show your displeasure in that system. But obviously it's super important to yeah, really put that pressure on the government, like you said. Got a message here from Christy. How can people get involved in the Australian mass mobilization? Which I might be able to answer.
I'm muted, it's okay. I was looking for the email address. What I think is everyone can send us an email if you would like to join the mass mobilization. I'm trying to copy this. We'll see if it works. I'm going to put it in the chat. Are you ready? Okay. What is the mass mobilization? It is a project to bring all of us together around Australia for a mass mobilization, as is described. The idea is that we really quickly mobilize and build up lots of teams of people all around the country pulling together our brains, our resources, our ideas, and in this way add lots of people so that we can do a few waves of action, starting with, like was described, the fun, accessible activities, get a bit of that adrenaline and that energy to do something that's a little bit naughty. And then at the last stage is to completely block with, like, I'm going to say 50,000 people, a city or a spot, or just do something huge that's never been seen before. But making sure that while we're doing this, we have all the extra sort of framework in place. Like we have SOS, we have regen at front of mind, like all the time, that we all know and understand the DNA, and that way just build on like a really healthy foundation. So that group's been meeting now for a few months with Roger Hallam as our sort of advisor and support. We're speaking to lots of people in the UK and in the US, and yeah, we're slowly building sort of the bits to be able to share it with everyone, but anyone can join. If you just send an email, we'll find roles. We're working on roles right now. And yeah, I think the mobilisation team has some cool stuff coming up in the next 2 weeks as well.
And I'll just read out that email address just for the people on the streaming services. It's AUS mass mob, so AUSMASSMOB .xr@gmail.com. So osmassmob.xr@gmail.com. And yeah, we'll find something for you to help for sure. There's lots of stuff to do, and obviously super important, because it's sort of the pinnacle of what XR is about, really, isn't it? How do you envisage our XR actions with the COVID problems and restrictions? From Harold.
I see the restrictions lifting slowly, but I also see us being respectful to the fact that it's caused so much grief and heartache overseas, and we don't want to get to that stage. So if we're told to keep distance, we keep distance. You can do activism by keeping a distance. You can work in small groups, in household groups. You can do things by yourself by standing 3 meters apart from 1,000 people. There's lots of things that you can do, but also, yeah, making sure that you do keep it respectful and keep in mind that this has been, you know, people have lost jobs, people potentially worried about losing houses. Yeah, it's definitely a really serious situation. So I think we wait to see when restrictions get a bit easier and what we can do within that isn't going to be, well, disrespectful, I guess, to everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, Sarah. Thanks for that. That was our last question on here. Andy, do you want to take the go facilitation?
Well, I was chatting to Sarah earlier today, and we both agreed that we're spending way too much time on Zoom. So I thought maybe we would just have an early minute and wrap it up, and maybe just ask Sarah if there's anything else that she'd like to share or talk about. Otherwise, an early minute.
No, I don't think I do have anything. I'm really happy that I could talk to people, and if anyone has more questions or suggestions or ideas, and that would always be awesome and welcome. I mean, there was so much that happened in the year that we were doing stuff overseas that I could probably tell stories for days. So yeah, we learned a lot the hard way, lots of heartache and lots of difficulties, but we also found ways to get around all of them and work together. So I think we can all do that. So yeah, thank you, wonderful people. Can everyone turn their cameras on before we go as well?
I was going to suggest that too. Yeah, everyone turn on and have a wave. Go on. Now if the internet crashes now, we're good.
We're okay.
Oh, mine stopped. Everyone.
That's great. Thank you, folks.
All right, we'll start recording now.